With under a week to go before Ahsoka, the character whose story I'm most interested in from what we've seen in the trailers so far is Sabine's. There's a lot of pretty interesting crumbs there, and I've been eating them up like a greedy little rat. Ezra and Thrawn's location and what they've been up to is obviously an interesting mystery as well, but that's less of a character arc and motivation thing. With Sabine, in every trailer we've seen more and more hints that she seems to be getting some kind of Jedi training from Ahsoka. Yet, as far as we know, she's never been Force-sensitive so far. And really, given Shin's taunt and her failure to use Force Push like it seems like she wants to here in the fight with Shin, she still doesn't have the Force sensitivity thing down yet. There's only so much you can tell from the trailers, and I've discussed it a bit before, but there's heavy implication that Ahsoka and Sabine have had some sort of prior outing trying to find Ezra, which both didn't succeed, and seems to have strained their relationship, while also beginning this whole master/apprentice thing. But especially with the newer clip where Sabine is training with the blast shield down on the helmet, like we've seen so often as a Jedi training method in Star Wars, on top of what looks like a clear attempt to use the Force to me in the initial trailer, it looks like this goes beyond just the kind of training where Kanan taught her to use the Darksaber into actual attempts at training in the Force. The first response I've seen or received when suggesting this is that Ezra and Kanan would have known she could use the Force if she could. But while Jedi may be able to sense a use of the Force, simple Force sensitivity isn't as easy a thing to sense. Vader didn't sense it in Leia, and Qui-Gon and the Jedi Council needed midichlorian counts and other tests to know Anakin was Force sensitive. And frankly, Qui-Gon's own training, and even Vader's, was far more extensive than Kanan's. He did his best, but he was a Padawan when the Purge happened, and he was never really portrayed as being among the most powerful Force users anyways. Ezra, for his part, was also relatively new in his Force training, so the kind of niche skill of sensing whether someone else is potentially Force sensitive is kind of outside their skill sets. With that in mind, it's entirely possible Sabine's been Force sensitive the whole time, but hasn't known or been able to access that skill set. For Ahsoka to agree to train her this way, you'd think she would have to have some kind of inkling that Sabine could use the Force, or else why waste her and Sabine's time? I think this leaves a few possible explanations for what's going on, though some elements of these options could also mix together, or maybe there's just something else going on entirely, but stay with me on this. The first is probably the least interesting and most likely. Sabine is Force sensitive and always has been, but nobody happened to know, coming all the way down from possible ancestry back to Tar Vizsla. Clan Wren is a vassal of House Vizsla, so there's a connection there, though that often gets turned into her definitely being a Vizsla descendant, which I don't think has ever been confirmed by anything. The second is that Sabine has insisted on this training while being unsure if she's actually Force sensitive, which could still fit in parts of the first option, and then Ahsoka agreed to try it, with the failures to make progress becoming a source of tension. But the big difference with this option is that Sabine doesn't end up being able to use the Force, and I don't see them putting all this stuff in about her trying and then having her fail, unless it's part of some realization that she doesn't need to use the Force to be valid or worthwhile. But even just with the few shots in the trailers with such a focus on that, I don't really see that being the way it works out. The third option is that Ahsoka has learned something about the nature of the Force from her time in the World Between Worlds, and we lean more into the Forces in everyone element, meaning everyone has some kind of access to the Force, even if it's in varying amounts, or if Ahsoka has to do something special to kind of unlock that potential in Sabine, so she might not have been able to be trained before. I don't really mind any of these options, but if Sabine has always been Force sensitive, I really hope they don't lean too hard on the Tar Vizsla connection for it. In my opinion, Star Wars, whether it's Legends or canon, always goes too hard in the Force becoming this hereditary set of superpowers. There are sometimes attempts to democratize it a bit more, like what Last Jedi seemed to be hinting at with the Broom Boy, and it's something I think Rey Nobody had an advantage on over making her come from the Palpatines and emphasize its nature as a universal force, but these storylines tend to be more rare. I think it's also the kind of thing that's potentially worth including as an intentional paradigm shift in that direction. Family is obviously a huge theme in Star Wars, but as the Rey Skywalker story shows, family is more than blood. And I mostly just don't think that these storylines about family have to come at the expense of oligarchy also becoming an accidental theme every single time. Those are my pre-season thoughts on Sabine, though. Let me know in the comments what you think is going on with her and what you're most excited for heading into Ahsoka.